So this is called Your Past Experience, even though, ironically, I'm going to be sharing my past experiences. And I'm not doing this because I have this need to do so, but as I share, I'm hoping that you will think back to those experiences you've had for paid and unpaid jobs so that you can identify what you liked, what you didn't like, what you're good at, what you might not be good at, something that you could be good at but you haven't pursued, because I feel strongly that the past holds clues to tell us what direction we should go and what we can avoid in the future. And to do that, I'm going to walk us through some of my past experiences all the way up to the present, because I think that that will trigger some memories for you, because I've had quite a few different jobs, a lot of different combinations from a young age. So let's get started. I'm calling this the starting out phase. And this, for me, was up to 8 years old. And that experience was primarily entrepreneurship at first, actually. Here's my little lemonade stand that I set up in Nebraska when I was 7 or 8. And I thought it was great. See, I'm out there setting up all the chairs, got the sign up, the glasses up, and I even had a couple of my sisters out there to support me. Of course, one is eating watermelon and one is sunning herself, but they were out there to support me. In fact, one of my sisters was my first customer, and I think she was probably enjoying the product. But after a little while, some of the local teenagers came along and purchased some of the orange juice. Now, this was a great experience for me because I learned a few things. First of all, there's some complexity to setting up the lemonade stand, which I took for granted. My parents let me use the table, the chairs, the frozen lemonade, the blender, and the glasses. And so once I started making sales, my parents were like, well, what's our cut? And I hadn't thought about that before setting up my stand, and learned then that anyone that helps you along the way, you must take care of and pay, and that I was lucky that the supplies were already in the home. I didn't have to go buy those. And so that would have cut into my profit. So I learned some lessons at a very young age about business at that lemonade stand. The next area, or the part of my life, was the possibilities stage, right? It was from 9 to 18 years old, and maybe a little bit longer than 18, maybe up until 20 years old. But for purposes of this, I wanted to share that as the lemonade stand was not really an option where we had moved in Michigan, and I took a paper out. I'd always wanted a paper out, and I was 9 years old, so I was too young, but they really needed someone, and I was tall for my age, and so they allowed me to do it. And the funny thing is I don't have any pictures from when I was an actual paper girl. However, I do have newspaper excerpts from when I was a paper carrier of the month, and the next year I was one of the paper carriers of the year. And on this paper out, I learned about customer service, about business, about delegating and responsibility. And it was a great growth opportunity for me. Now, along with that came the rain and the snow and the dogs, and so I learned what I didn't like along with that. At the most part, I got to be out and about doing things, and I really enjoyed that freedom and flexibility and the opportunity to take responsibility without anyone really looking over my shoulder. Along that, as I got a little bit older, I was babysitting and doing neighborhood lawn jobs, but also got into making these chocolate suckers, which it's awesome. I found this photo on the internet for free, and this was the exact mold I used. I would buy chocolate from a special store, and I'd buy it in brown, and then I'd buy the colorful chocolate for the heart on the front of the bear, and I would wrap it and sell it that exact way. So I thought it was great that the internet provided an example of what I actually created back then. Because back in the 80s, we didn't take as many photos as we do now because film was more expensive and we didn't have that digital stuff. So I would sell these door to door, and I would sell them at church and to a few people of school. To be honest, it was great fun, but I think I probably sold more to myself than anyone. And so I quickly learned that it was important to to create the amount of inventory you needed, but not make too much that you were tempted to use some of it. And obviously I lost some profits from that. I also had a little bit of a crafty streak, and this only lasted a year or two because I'm no longer crafty, but I made these little handmade lace baskets with my sister. So the lids had the lace and the flowers and the ribbon on it, and people saw these, and also some photo albums that had some similar covers that we sold a few of. And it was an option where we were using our creative talents, but I don't know that it brought us a lot of money, especially because I liked very nice materials, and that cost more, but I didn't raise the price to the customer. In the summers, sometimes I would help weed petunias along a main road in our town for the Chamber of Commerce. And that was a very backbreaking project, literally, but I learned how much effort it took to take care of these flowers. The watering was easy. It was the weeding that took a lot of time. And so now when I look at certain projects, I can tell that it's going to be too high of a level of effort. And so, for example, I would never plant massive amounts of flowers unless I knew I had the time to maintain it. And I've taken that lesson into many other jobs in my life. Whenever I start something, I look at how long it will take to maintain it. Of course, in my late teens, I started to work at Kentucky Fried Chicken. I worked at this restaurant called Tony's Texan and got some experience in customer service in the fast food and the restaurant industry. And that's where you learn really quickly that how you interact with customers is very important. It's also where you learn that this is probably not something you want to do the rest of your life unless you have a passion for it, because it can be really stressful work, sometimes in very tight places, sometimes very dirty conditions, and sometimes with people that are really not appreciative of what you're doing, that can also affect your bottom line, right? You'll get fewer tips. And so the upside is that the restaurants versus fast food, you could get tips, where at Kentucky Fried Chicken, you never got a tip. At that point, I think I earned like $4 an hour. And so, and it was in very small, greasy spaces that I worked. So those were some of the jobs that I had in that 9 to 18 years old time period. So let's look at my college years. Now, like most of you, I had different jobs during college, and they ran the spectrum, right? I was a janitor at one point, helped work on a grounds crew, helped put together packages from a printing shop. I worked at special events. And I also was a resident assistant in the dorms, which was great because that's where you took on some more leadership responsibility, which is very hard amongst your peers, right? When you're that age, that you're calling them on some things that it's very difficult to call them on if you're in the peer-to-peer relationship. But what happened in college is that I started to have more of these paid by the hour jobs. For resident assistant, I wasn't, but all these other jobs, they were definitely paid by the hour. And I started to take on a different attitude about working than I had had when I was younger. I was more entrepreneurial. I was willing to create and sell certain things on my own. And I got more fear. And I started to look for jobs and look at the hourly rates and worry about how many hours I was going to work each week. And not that I didn't add value in those jobs. I think I did. But it was very focused on, I'm going to go clock in, and when I'm done, I clock out, I go home, and I move on with life. Now I started to take on some K through 12 substituting jobs, and I did everything. I taught math, I taught first graders, I did swimming, music, gym, computers. I took whatever things came at me, and that was a great experience because you learned about a lot of different subject areas and a lot of different age groups, but you also learned how to think on the fly and come up with creative solutions very quickly, because sometimes some things you're doing in the classroom just didn't work. And so that's extremely valuable experience that I've taken with me into my current jobs, that I'm grateful to have learned, and to realize that you can learn how to think on the fly and that pretty soon it can become a skill. So after college, now for most of us, college is in that 18 to, I'd say 22 to 24 years range. So from about 24, 25 to I'm a little over 40 years old, I've had a variety of jobs. However, they have not been in entrepreneurship very much. Instead of becoming a school teacher, I went on into the recruiting world and the world of human resources, and then went and got a master's degree in instructional design. And that's where you learn a lot of adult learning theory and learn about different technologies used for learning. And then for the past 10 years, I've worked in the field of training and development, creating products for people to deliver online or in the classroom, but primarily managing the development of that product. So work with a lot of graphic designers, a lot of programmers, and a lot of subject matter experts in different areas of content. And so I've learned a lot through that process, right? Leadership, management, decision making. I've learned practical technical skills and customer relationship skills at a higher level than I'd ever worked in the past. However, I found that I have stayed in that mental model of working for that hourly wage. And even though I have a great salary and I get to be an intrapreneur in many of these settings, there's this part of me still that yearns for that set of first experiences I had in life where I had that freedom. I was responsible for myself. I was responsible for how I interacted with customers, and I created my own products. So what can we learn from all of this? Well, I'm realizing as I review all of these different parts of my life that I have learned more than I thought in certain areas, and am practicing what I've learned in my job. But it's now time to take that next step. And that's part of the reason why I'm creating this course, why I've created a website where I highlight and promote entrepreneurs, because I feel very strongly that whether you keep your day job or you decide to leave your day job and do entrepreneurship full time, that each of us has this part of us that needs to be pursuing that thing on our own, whether it's on the side or full time, to have that full outlet for our creative endeavors. And we can really help others with that, and we can grow ourselves. And so I hope that you, as I was sharing my story, that you weren't all wrapped up in my story, but that it triggered you to remember some things you did when you were growing up. If you were out there mowing lawns or picking up trash or were a janitor or delivered newspapers or created your own thing, to remember those things and write them down in chronological order and start putting down what you liked about those activities and what you didn't like and where you have your strengths and your weaknesses to draw from. Because that's important to remember as you start figuring out what you want to do as an entrepreneur or as an employee and an entrepreneur.